Dobar dan. Good afternoon and welcome to our online Croatia Fest. My name is John Morovich.
And I'm Joanne Abdo.
Today we're going to be showing you an exhibit of traditional Croatian garments that are in the collection of the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans. The Seattle Junior Tamburitzans were formed in 1970 by Richard Major and Tom Krpitic. Since that time, the ensemble has been able to collect many costumes, 33 sets altogether. Some are costumes, others are traditional garments. The word narodna nošnja means people's garment. A costume is Batman, Superman, SpongeBob. These are none of those. What you're about to see is something truly extraordinary, and that is our collection of narodne nošnje of the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans. Welcome and enjoy. So the first garment that we're going to be looking at is from the area of Posavina, from the town of Sisak. And women in the Posavina region along the Sava River each would have her own loom, and she would grow her own flax, and out of that flax she would create her own woven linen. And this is an example, a very old example of a garment made of hand-woven, hand-grown linen. It is then pleated. If you'll notice, each of the women would wear a coral necklace or perhaps some coins. We don't have the coins today, but they're very rare. But we do have authentic coral beads and then a silk ribbon attached to the breast. It is then carried through the blouse, the embroidery, and you can see that it all matches. Down, if you look down the apron, again, this is all hand woven linen and then embroidered with silk threads. If you notice on the back of this dress, it's pleated and then embroidered with the same pattern on the back. And then finished off with handmade lace. It's then pleated and in a Baroque style, which is very common in that area. And they do dances that, one is called the Dermish. And the Dermish dance, they get together in a circle, 4, 5, 6 people, back holding hands in the back, and then they rotate very quickly, and then they'll alternate that with some bouncing steps, or drmanje, shaking steps. So when the wind, when the air catches this, the pleats, then it makes it very full on the stage. This is a special piece because this belonged to Katie Boots Ivanek. Katie was born in Vancouver, BC, and lived in Seattle for many years and played tamburica and danced kolo, avid musician and singer and dancer. So this particular garment was worn in Vancouver and Seattle hundreds and hundreds of times, and Katie's family donated it to the Tamburitzans 2 years ago. So we're very fortunate to have this piece in our collection. It is indeed a very unique representation of the costumes of Hrvatska Posavina. This is a very special hat. It is called Parta, P-A-R-T-A. This is found in the Posavina region. And as you can see, it's got hundreds, if not thousands, of seed beads that have been sewn onto a silk hat with a small bouquet of roses at the back of the head. And these would be worn on festive occasions by young girls. This would be part of her dowry. She would be sewing these and have these ready for when she got married. The next piece that we're going to be looking at is also from the region of Posavina. This garment is hand woven. This is from the town of Krapier, which is just east of the first costume we looked at Sisak. This one is also made of that hand woven linen. But what's different about it is that the design is actually woven into the weave itself. And if you look at the top, this has a lace collar. That lace collar is made out of bobbin lace. And that bobbin lace is very indicative of that region of Posavina, but it's very much in contrast to the heaviness of the garment. Again, this one is also pleated, many pleats, and then topped off with handmade lace all around the fringe of the apron. This particular costume was donated to the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans by the family of Theda and Merle Doherty. And the Doherty family was very active in folk dancing in Richland, Washington. And so we were very fortunate that their family donated this prize costume to us. It is very unique. I only know of 4 or 5 of these on this continent. And then when we open it up, you can see really the beautiful detail of the rosette design, made in a geometric pattern within the weaving. And the same design is carried through on the sleeve. This is actually bunched up so that just the arm comes out and this billows out. If you notice on the back, it has the lace in the middle as well, pleating, and then the design carried through on the hem. Imagine, if you will, 100 people after Sunday Mass getting together and dancing the dermish in these beautiful garments. The next piece that we're going to be looking at is from the border of Baranya and Bachca. So this is in northeastern Croatia, the region of Baranya. The town is called Bratina. And this is a very unique piece. I only know of 3 or 4 of these on this continent, and we've got one of them. We're very grateful for that. If you look at this garment, also has hand-woven linen. The difference is that it's textured and it's in a seersucker pattern. So for those of you who remember in the 70s, seersucker, this is the pattern that you'll see in this garment carried all the way through. What's interesting about in a tradition in Baranya is that the belt is worn underneath the apron. Most places in Croatia and across the Balkan Peninsula, the belt is worn over the apron at the top, but in this particular case, it's below it. And the belt itself is hand-woven and is adorned with sequins. And as you notice, this particular garment has a lot of sequins. This part of Croatia was under the Hungarian influence, under Hungarian administration. So, of course, Hungarian cultural pieces came into the costuming. And so one of those things you'll see is the use of sequin and ribbons. So you look at Hungarian costumes and you'll definitely see this kind of U shape in the sequins, in the ribbons, and decorated with hundreds and hundreds of metal sequins. You'll also notice in this central area, this is all hand embroidered and then sequins on top of it with these little rosettes all over as well. It's then finished off with hand-made lace with a blue ribbon that goes all the way through it, woven all the way through it. So this particular garment was given to us by the family of Edith Cuthbert, and Edith lived in Oakland, California, and was a Croatian folk dance teacher, taught in the Sacramento area, San Francisco Bay Area, and she had dozens and dozens of traditional Croatian garments. And I went down to San Francisco about 6 weeks ago and picked these up. So this is the first time this garment has been seen in many, many years. Edith passed away 3 years ago, but we are very fortunate to have Edith's collection in our collection here in Seattle. This is the first of several garments that you're going to be seeing from Edith's collection. Edith started dancing in the 1950s, was very active in the Kola Festival in San Francisco, and of course taught hundreds and hundreds of young people how to do Croatian dancing in the San Francisco Bay Area and Sacramento. So what you'll see at the top of the sleeve, and for the entire length of the sleeve, it is encrusted with metal sequins with unbelievably black rosettes. But this was a very common in Hungarian and Baranya costumes to have some sort of a black border here. And this particular one, instead of using a geometric pattern, they used a rosette pattern. Hundreds and hundreds of sequins. This is a very old garment. It's got to be at least 100 years old. And if we look on the sleeve, it's got more embroidery and more handmade lace with a border of sequins. And if we look at the back, this is far less decorated in the back as it would be in the front. But the beauty of it is, of course, in this seersucker fabric that you see and the pleating in the back. And then towards the bottom, it has embroidery of white gold with, again, the sequins and lace. The next piece that we're going to see is from the region of Pokuplje, which is on the Kupa River. This is heading from Zagreb, south and west towards Karlovac. Like the other pieces we've seen today, this is made out of hand-woven linen. And what's interesting, though, about this is, again, this embroidery is done on the loom. And it's a very geometric sort of design, and it's carried throughout the whole garment. What's interesting about it, though, it's all woven in one piece. So the piece is about this big. So the breastplate, the apron, and all the fringe, including the belt, is all made in one woven piece. And then each of the different pieces is then cut and then assembled into the garment. So what is here a belt, this is actually woven from the same fabric, but this designs here are all just woven. And what's beautiful about this is the bottom is hand done, hand stitched, and of course the Croatian colors, red, white, and blue, to finish off the apron. What you'll see, which is very unique about this garment that the others didn't have, was this very, very fancy beaded necklace. So I'm going to turn this over to my sister, Joanne, who's going to tell you about this beautiful necklace.
Yes, this necklace was a symbol of status and wealth. And when we were asked to create these necklaces, my brother John, who is the director of the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans, asked Brenda Huber, our instructor of the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans, to create this necklace. And again, it is a symbol of status and wealth. And Brenda Googled a Bratina necklace. And from there, she downloaded 700 images on her phone and used all of those images as her tool to create this beautiful necklace. She started with just a plain ribbon, and like the fabric of the costume, it was like a loom where there are 10 strands of silk cord, and she intertwined metal and vintage beads to create the necklace. When Brenda used the silk cord when she made her first necklace, in performances the beads broke, and with the help of Bratinečko Srce, this folklore group in Croatia, they gave her some tips. So first being to use a steel cord to prevent the breakage, and also to pin the beads to the sides of the costume to prevent it from bouncing and jiggling and falling off and breaking.
So we're very fortunate because the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans has a complete set of costumes from Bratina, Kulpinec, Zdenčina area in Polkupje. And this particular one came from the Edith Cuthbert collection out of San Francisco. And each one of these in our collection is a different color scheme. So you'll have, this one is mostly white with yellow and orange and red, but some will be blue themed, some will be red themed, some are orange, some are green, some are black. And so when I saw this costume in the collection, I was overjoyed. And it just happened that one of the necklaces that Brenda made matched exactly the colors of this particular garment. So we're really fortunate to have that. The collection that the Tamburitzans has of the other pieces were bought from the ensemble Živili in Columbus, and through a financial donation through John and Barb Vukas, we were able to obtain that set of 25 garments. And with this one and a couple others that I've bought on eBay, we have enough for a whole village. So we're very pleased to have a whole set of these, and we're going to be talking about the headpiece, the beaded headpiece that goes along with this costume. And as you can see, the design is carried through on the sleeve. This is all hand woven. One might think it's reminiscent in colors of Native American and South American, Central American weavings and colors and design, actually. So as you see on this piece, it has the jumper. And then what's different about this particular garment and in the region of Polkupje is all of the hundreds and hundreds of pleats in the back of this skirt. These aren't just ironed in or pressed in. These are hammered in with a rock. So there are hundreds and hundreds of pleats in this particular garment.
Shown here is the headdress of Bratina, and it symbolizes the status and wealth of a family. Unlike this headdress, younger girls and girls preparing to be married wear a pearl-covered headband called parta. Young married girls without children can wear a parta and a scarf tied behind their head. Married ladies wear this colorful beaded hat shown. Older married ladies wear a scarf tied under the chin, and very old ladies the same but completely white. These headdresses do match the color of their garments. Green, blue, purple, and black are common with most married ladies. And red is worn for celebrations such as going to church, important life events, and it symbolizes vitality, happiness, luck, and fertility. Some interesting things about this headdress is the shape of the mirrors on the hat. For example, the 3 mirrors in the shape of a heart, they do represent the Trinity, the Holy Trinity, and they are surrounded by pearls. And mirrors were attached to the hat to ward off evil spirits.
This is a really interesting piece. This is from the town of Sveta Nedelja, which is near the town of Samobor, which is in northern Croatia, in the Zagorje region. What's interesting about this is, like the rest that you've been seeing, it's made of the hand-woven linen. And this one, like the one previous, is with a jumper. But the jumper has some detail on it, hand-woven. And the blouse itself has embroidery on it with weaving. And this is actually one of the few regions in Croatia where you will have embroidery and weaving and crocheting all in one garment. And a few years ago, I was able to purchase 4 of these garments from a woman in Boston. And she shipped them out here to us and even came out to visit us. And so I was on a search of getting a few more. And so I bought one in Zagreb. And then we had just recently 3 donated to us from this town of Sveta Nedelja. Well, they looked really wonderful on our kids. And I said to my sister, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could get the Kralos necklace to go along with these costumes. And so what you see right up here is the Kralos. Can you tell us a little bit about the Kralos and how you went about making those?
Yes, so we had success in making the Bratina necklaces. So when John said, hey, there's a necklace that goes with this costume, I had another bright idea to ask Brenda Huber, our Seattle Junior Tamburitzans music director, to please see if she could figure out how to make this necklace. And my brave girl, she went and Googled Kralos necklace, and she found a class online through Udemy, and she found the teacher Vesna Vurušić-Pećančić, a native of Zagreb, who offers an online class. Brenda purchased the class, and she was able to create this necklace. The Kralos is an intricate beaded necklace originally made and worn by the women of Samobor, northwestern Croatia, as part of their traditional folk costume in the early 20th century. Variations of this unique necklace became part of traditional folk costumes across north and central Croatia, first in Sveta Nedelja, then further north in villages of Bistra, and eventually east to the region of West Posavina. Originally, Samobor's Kralos was handcrafted using several thousands of tiny glass beads on 8 strands of horsehair. These strands were interwoven in a specific way to create geometric shapes resembling fine lace. Kralos necklaces communicated a woman's socio-economic role in her community. A young woman would wear her first Kralos on her wedding day. It was her mother's role to make or purchase it for her. This first Kralos was predominantly made out of red glass beads, representing femininity, youth, fertility, and even believed to protect the young bride from evil. As a woman aged, she would wear a Kralos with less red beads and more darker tones, usually in brown color. A widow would wear less intricate Kralos beads of the color blue. Today, the process of handcrafting Kralos has officially been declared as Croatian Intangible Cultural Heritage by Croatia's Ministry of Culture.
As you see, this is how the Kralos is attached with a red ribbon, and underneath it is lace. And this is the back of the jumper, which has the same detailing in the weave. And if you look down below, down at the hem, it has a very wide design, which is very rare. We can determine that this is a very old costume. It's got to be at least 100 years old. The next garment that we're going to be looking at is from the town of Bistra in the region of Hrvatsko Zagorje, near the town of Zaprešić. And this is a really unique piece. They're very, very difficult to come by. This was one in Edith Cuthbert's collection from the San Francisco Bay Area. You've seen some of her pieces earlier in the show today. So this particular garment is really quite old. It's got to be at least 100 years old. And this particular one is woven in one piece and then cut and then assembled. And it's woven all the way through. It's one of the few that has weaving all the way through the breastplate, on the sleeves, and through the apron and in the back, which I'll show you in a minute. This one is adorned with very special lace from Zagorje, very unique. And then, as we can see, very interesting lace here on the bottom. And of course, it's got the pleats, like everything else that you've seen so far today. One thing I want you to pay attention to is the necklace, the Kralos. And you saw the Kralos necklace from Sveta Nedelja. This is the Kralos from Bistra. And Joanne's going to talk to us about the Bistra Kralos.
Yes, unlike the Sveta Nedelja Kralos, this Kralos from Bistra has 12 strands. And again, originally made with horsehair. Certainly, if you can imagine how careful they had to be to maintain its shape. You can visit a museum in Samobor, Croatia, and see an original Kralos. This necklace compiles of 6,000 beads and pearls, and it takes approximately 35 hours to make. It is on a steel cord for strength, and these colors represent traditional folklore colors of the traditional costume. I made the necklace that I'm wearing, and I used contemporary colors. This necklace took me approximately 20 hours to make. This is the necklace from Sveta Nedelja versus the one shown on the mannequin is from the Bistra region. You could learn how to make your own necklace by visiting our website, CroatiaFest.org, and look for the link.
So if you look at this one has quite a bit of a weave, a pattern to the weaving. And what's interesting about this one is that usually Croatian costumes go straight across on the border. This particular one in Bistra has a dip in it. When we first saw this costume, we thought, oh, they're not wearing those very well, but this is the style. And you can see that there's embroidery mixed in with weaving, more embroidery, and then carried through on the hem. And on the sleeve, you have the exact same pattern because this was woven out of one piece of fabric. And then sewn together, we have the embroidery, the weaving, and then the lace. And in this region, they also do that Dermish dancing. The next piece that we're going to be looking at is from the region of Slavonia, which is in eastern Croatia. All of the garments that we've looked at today are the most intricate, the most beautiful, the most ornate of the garments. Because there would be a simple version of the same silhouette that would be worn for every day. And the pieces that we're looking at today are worn for special occasions. They're worn for going to church on Sunday, for a baptism or a wedding, for a church holiday. And in Slavonia, this is no exception. And in this town, which is called Đakovo, this is actually from the town of Semelci, a woman might have 5 or 6 of these. One for every day, one for a special occasion, but just like maybe for going to church. But she might have even more that would be completely covered in gold thread and in sequins. This one is made of linen, like in the past that we've looked at. But what's different about this is that these are silk. We have silk scarves and a silk apron matching. And during the Hungarian times, these things were imported from different parts of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They even came from as far as Lyon in France. So these are very, very prized silk fabrics. You cannot get these at all, impossible to find. And then you'll see a coin necklace. In Turkish times, your clothing could not be taxed. So there is definitely a tradition in Croatia and other parts of the Balkan Peninsula of sewing your coins to your garments so they would not be taxed. Then after the Turks left the area, they kept the tradition. And these would normally be Austrian ducats, as we were in under Austria. These actually are a replica. These are not Austrian ducats, even though they do look like them. They're the right color and shape and size, and then they're sewn on with gold thread. And our music director Brenda Longnecker-Huber created these as she did some of the other pieces that you've seen today in the necklaces, and we're very proud of these. This particular garment was donated to us by the family of Kathy Sellers, and Kathy was an avid folk dancer here in the Seattle area. She and her husband Bill met folk dancing in the 1960s, and they bought a set of these costumes, garments, from Dennis Boxell in the late 60s, and they've been worn for different performances here in Seattle by Radost and Ružice and Koleda. The Koleda collection ended up in San Francisco with West Wind, so the Tamburitzans assumed all of the costumes from West Wind, and these were a part of them. This particular one was Kathy's. This was her personal costume, but we acquired 6 from West Wind, and then we purchased 3 more, one on eBay, if you can imagine. So Kathy willed this to the Tamburitzans. She learned how to dance kolo, Croatian dances, from the late Louis Krmpetic. Louis and Tom started the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans, and Louis, along with Tom and their uncle John Vukalic and John Erdely and Nick Dublevich, made up the Seattle Tamburica Orchestra during the 50s and 60s, and many, many folk dance parties happened. So Kathy willed this in memory of Tom and Louie and all the wonderful times that they had performing this music and dancing to tamburica. So if we look here on the sleeve, This is all embroidered with white gold. And then it's gathered at the wrist. And then what you'll see on the wrist is what Joanne has on her arm. These wristlets, they are knitted yarn with hundreds and hundreds of white beads. We haven't figured out how to make that yet, but we purchased these in Zagreb. We bought enough for the whole group. They're really beautiful. They come in how many colors?
I would say about 5 colors: maroon, navy, black, green, red. And the beads, there's hundreds of seed beads that are pre-strung into the thread or the yarn. And when the pattern calls for the bead, you pull the bead up into your knitting and knit the bead into your work.
What's interesting about this is the adornment on the back. As you can see on the front, all it has really is the coins. But here on the back, it has a back ribbon. And the back ribbon is embroidered with white gold and sequins, little seed beads, and then little strands of fringe of silk. And you can see the beautiful pattern in the silk. And then this fringe is handmade. Then if we look at the back, each one of these lines is designed out of seed beads. There are thousands of beads in this particular garment, and then many, many, many pleats. This is called a shamia. This goes along with the Đakovo costume. This is very traditional in the Đakovo region. As you can see, it has a lot of silver and gold embroidery with the seed beads and the sequins. And of course, the 2 little small bouquets of carnations and or roses. And then it kind of bumps out at the back with more gold. And then lots of seed bead jewelry, silver and gold. We've looked at mostly women's garments today, but we're going to take a look at a couple of men's garments. This is the one that would match with the one we just saw from Đakovo. Most Croatian garments in the Pannonian Plain are made of a white shirt and white pants that are made out of that same handmade linen. But what's unique about this one is the breastplate of this particular shirt. And it is sewn with hundreds and hundreds of sequins and beads. And then the silk vest, which is hand-stitched with very special buttons that would be typical of Austrian times. what we also want to see in this particular shirt is that it has hundreds of pleats in it, tiny pleats. And I left these threads in. You can see the threads. I left those in on purpose because this is how you keep it together and how you would re-iron it again. So I have left that in there so you can see the technique. It goes in and out and in and out through those pleats. So you get these nice sharp pleats, and they're repeated in through the sleeve as well. So even though we have looked at a few costumes from the Posavina region, I brought one more for a very special reason. This one's very special. Even though it has the same silhouette as the ones from before, this one is embroidered with yarn. The first one that you saw was embroidered with silk. The second one was woven, and this one is embroidered with yarn and with gold thread. It has the same basic shape that we were talking about earlier. And this is an original coral necklace and ribbons, which would be traditionally worn with the belt. But the reason that I really brought it today is because this was owned by Eleanor Mikulic Korvas. And Eleanor could be credited, at least I credit her, with starting the Croatian folk dance scene here in Seattle in the 1950s. She and Louis Krpetić took an interest in traditional Croatian folk dancing and tamburica music, and Eleanor would wear this garment to all of the parties and concerts that we had. She co-founded the Seattle Kolo Club in the 1950s, and a whole group of Seattle Croatians went down to San Francisco to the Kolo Festival in 1952 to learn how to do these dances. The reason they really went down there is because when our immigrants came, they didn't bring that many dances with them. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But when they went to San Francisco, they learned how to dance the Kolo. And now the Kolo Festival is still in existence some 60 years later. And their founder, John Filsich, is now in his 90s. We just celebrated his birthday. I believe he's 96 now. So we owe a debt of gratitude to people like Louis Krpetić and Eleanor Korvas and John Filsich, who have taught us these dances. So we're going to look at one more men's costume. This is actually a coat. Underneath it is the basic white shirt and pants, and then with a red vest underneath. And it's really nothing spectacular from the front. It's a wool coat. But if we look up at the top, we see a red silk scarf. So when Croatian men had to serve in the Austrian army, their wives, upon departure for the army, would take off one of their scarves from either from their head or from another part of their garment, and they would tie it around the neck of the man going off to serve in the army. And it's a beautiful silk. And the French, of course, noticed this, and the French took it on as a fashion statement. So now, today, most of us have to put on a necktie, which came from the French word kravat for the word Croat. So think of Croatia every time you put on your necktie. So while the front of the garment didn't really have much going on, we look at the back, and it's really quite extraordinary. It is decorated with hundreds and hundreds of felt sequins. And this was These kind of coats were very common during Austrian and Hungarian times, more so in the Hungarian side. Many of you who have seen Romanian and Hungarian garments will recognize this basic silhouette. And this would be worn for special occasions and, of course, during the wintertime. This was donated to our group by the Doherty family from Richland, Washington. So today we've looked at a lot of ornate garments with embroidery, weaving, sequins. This is a garment that is relatively plain in comparison, but I brought it here on purpose. This is from the town of Delnice, or as they say, Devance. Delnice or Devance is in the Gorski Kotar region of Croatia, which looks remarkably like Puget Sound. It's a mountainous region with rivers and lakes where they do a lot of forestry and mining, just like here in Central Washington. And in Central Washington and Roslyn and Ronald and Cle Elum, there is a large community of people from Gorski Kotar, Mrkopalj, Delnice, Crni Lug, Lokve. And it was one of my artistic dreams to be able to teach these dances and songs to the Tamburitzans, but it was very, very difficult to find these things. So I called Delnice about 10 years ago when we went on tour there, and we were able to have a folk dance workshop with the director of the ensemble in Delnice. And we were given this garment as a gift, and we used it to replicate it to make 30 more for our group here. So you'll see it's got the basic jumper that we talked about earlier, a very slender apron in the front, a woolen sash, and then with a very alpine-like scarf around the neck, and then these beads that are very specific to Delnice. So what's interesting about this, even though it doesn't have a lot of color to it, the most important part of this garment is the lace that's on the bottom of the skirt. So we've come to the last garment in our exhibit today. We want to thank you for joining us. This last garment is very special to my sister and to me, as it's the garment of the island of Zlarin, where my parental grandparents were born and immigrated to this country in the 1930s. The Seattle Junior Tamburitzans performed music and dances from the island of Zlarin. It was a dream of mine and of Joanne's to present this material, which is very unique. In 1981, when my sister and I, my parents, were in Croatia, we were given a book by my cousin, Vinko, which had all of the notations for the music and the dances. And when my grandmother came to this country in 1932, she didn't need her garment anymore. And so she sent it back to Zlarin. And so when we went back in 1981, my sister got the gift of one of these garments. So with the information of having the music, the dances notated, and then having an original garment, we were able to recreate it with a little bit of difficulty. And we did run into a few challenges. I'll tell you a little bit about this. It's this basic dress is called suknya, and the vest is called burić. And this is called a tkanica, which is pretty general around Croatia, where the belt is called tkanica. This is woven. And then this silk. So this is a very unique garment in that we have a cotton shirt, a wool vest and dress, and then the satin. If you notice here is coral. And Zlarin is known as the Coral Island. And my grandfather's sister and her husband were the last to actually create the coral jewelry by hand in Zlarin. There are coral shops on the island, and my cousin Ivana runs that shop. So when you go to Zlarin, you have to go and buy some coral from her. You'll also notice on here a chain, and that is connected to a knife called britva, or it's actually a razor. And they would use this for cutting different, if they had to go out into work in the vineyards, for instance, and they would cut the vines with that britva. So Joanne, why don't you tell us a little bit about the process of making these, because I had nothing to do with that.
Yes, so one of our very talented parents of the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans, Sarah Schaefer, is a highly skilled seamstress, and her mother taught her these skills on parchment paper. So that was her first step, was creating the pattern from parchment paper, but she came to later find out that through a fabric store that you can find easier products to make the pattern. So John referred to the book that was given to her. It was partially written in Croatian and partially written in English, and the pictures of the patterns were about wee big, very tiny. And they were also written in centimeters, and for having to make 20 costumes in 3 different sizes, she had multiple equations. So it's a good thing that she's in education. So her equation skills came into good play as each one of these costumes were custom made to fit each child. This particular costume has 3 panels. 2 panels were prepared to ship out to the volunteers of our group for pleating. And when we first came upon the wool, it's first of all, very hard to find because you need to find a wool that is light enough for movement of the dance and is also light enough to hold the pleat. And we did come across a vendor in New York who knew exactly what we were looking for, as he has a Greek dance folk ensemble, so he has used this fabric before. And so when Sarah shipped the panels out for pleating, my mom and I, we ordered a pleater to create the pleats. Well, this is where the bad luck came into play, because the pleaters that are now available are pretty much to fit sizes for dolls. So then my mom saw me nearly in tears because we were under a deadline, again, of making 20 costumes in a very short period of time. And my mom just said, well, why don't I just come back in a second? And I'm crying. And she comes back from being in her filing cabinet room, comes down with a manila folder, cuts the folder into 2-inch strips, and she placed the strips in between the fabric and started taking an iron to it. And then all of a sudden the tears went away and we had success. This is about 70 inches of fabric that is all gathered to 3 inches here. And with the same idea in mind, since the manila folder worked for pleats on the skirt and the bottom, we made tiny little accordion pleats with manila folder, and we pressed the fabric, and we put 3 needles, so 3 strands, through the fabric and tightened it. And that is when we sent it back to Sarah for the finishing touches. We were able to create 20 custom-made costumes from March to May, and literally right under the deadline we made it with all the help of parents bringing ironing boards to practice and dedicating themselves. We all were burning our fingers and getting blisters, but it was all for the love and the passion of the dances and songs from Zlarin that we wanted to present to the festival in Zagreb. You will see under the jumper, this is a vest. And when Sarah was making the vest, she referred to her daughter's Girl Scout vest as a pattern. I found that to be very interesting.
So, as Joanne said, we custom made 20 of these. And 2 years ago, we took the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans to Croatia to perform at two very special events. One was the International Children's Festival in Šibenik, which is only a 15-minute boat ride from this town of Zlarin. So we were able to bring back this tradition that we started in America and bring this back to Croatia. They were also, the kids were also able to perform at the Croatian Fraternal Union Festival in Zagreb at Lisinski Hall with 500 other Croatian American youth and Canadian. And really the highlight of our trip, of course, was a performance on Dobro jutro Hrvatska, which means good morning Croatia. So we're going to share that with you right now. Enjoy the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans and their songs and dances of Zlarin.
Oj, Zlarine, misto na srid mora, u tebi su momci kajno gora, a divojke kajno bile vile, svakome bi momku omilile. Aj, morode, I.
Thank you for joining us today for our virtual Narodna Nošnja exhibit. We would like to thank the Seattle Center, McCaw Hall, and Festál for making this possible. And thank you for joining us. We hope to see you live and in person at CroatiaFest 2021 at the Seattle Center. Visit our website at www.croatiafest.org. Do widzenia!
Do widzenia!